A hardened Marine, trained for battle, froze in horror when he saw him. A tiny boy, alone in the raging floodwaters. His family was gone. His hope was fading. And in that moment, the Marine faced a choice: walk away or risk everything to save him. What happened next will leave you breathless. Stay with us. This is a story of courage, heartbreak, and the unbreakable bond that formed in the storm. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us of the power of humanity, and we've got more coming your way. The storm that changed everything. The sky had turned into a furious, churning beast. Hurricane Nadine wasn't just another storm. It was an angry force of nature, swallowing entire neighborhoods in its path. Cedar Creek, a quiet Louisiana town nestled along the river, had always known floods, but nothing like this. The water wasn't rising. It was attacking. Sergeant Jake Mercer had seen war. He'd walked through the dust-choked streets of Fallujah, felt the weight of his rifle in his hands, heard the screams of battle. But this was different. War had rules, even in chaos. This storm had none. His boots sank into the thick mud as he waded through the flooded streets, the water rising past his waist. His unit had been deployed for disaster relief, but nothing could have prepared them for the devastation. Houses were half submerged, cars floated like discarded toys, and the air smelled like gasoline and wet earth. The only sounds were the relentless hammering of rain and the distant, panicked shouts of survivors. Jake adjusted the strap of his medical pack, his muscles tense. They'd been at it for hours, pulling families from rooftops, carrying the elderly through the currents. His body ached, but he pushed forward. That's what Marines did. Then a sound, faint, almost lost in the storm. A whimper. Jake froze. His flashlight cut through the darkness, the beam trembling in his grip. The rain made it hard to see, but then movement. A small figure, clinging to the gnarled branches of an oak tree. The water swirled violently around it, threatening to pull it under. A child. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The boy could have been more than 6 years old, his tiny fingers gripping the bark like his life depended on it. Because it did. His pajamas were soaked through, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes, wide with terror, locked onto Jake's. "Hey!" Jake shouted over the storm, his voice raw. "I'm coming for you, okay? Hold on." The boy didn't answer. His lips were blue, his whole body shaking. Jake knew hypothermia when he saw it. If they didn't get him out soon, he wouldn't last. Jake lunged forward, the current fighting him every step of the way. The water dragged at his legs, threatening to knock him off balance. He gritted his teeth and pushed harder. Then a groan, a deep, shuddering crack. The tree. The flood had eroded the roots, and now the massive oak trembled. The boy's grip slipped as the branch beneath him shifted. Jake's heart slammed against his ribs. He didn't think. He moved. With a final surge, he reached the tree just as the boy lost his hold. A small hand flailed in the air. Then Jake caught him, yanking him against his chest. The boy gasped, his tiny fingers digging into Jake's shirt like he'd never let go. "I got you," Jake muttered, tightening his grip. "I got you." The tree gave one last shudder before the current ripped it from the earth, sending it crashing into the dark water. Jake stumbled back, clutching the boy to him. The child was freezing, his breath shallow and fast. Jake shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around him, rubbing his arms to bring back warmth. "WH, where's your family?" Jake asked, scanning the water. No parents, no siblings, just this kid, alone in the middle of a disaster. The boy's lower lip trembled. "Mama said, stay here," he whispered. She took Lila and said the boats would come. Jake's stomach twisted. They left him. A voice shouted from behind. Jake turned to see a woman struggling toward them, her face streaked with tears. "Oh, my God! Eli," she cried. "You know him?" Jake barked. The woman nodded frantically. His mama. She took his little sister and ran for the evacuation trucks. She thought the rescuers would get him. Jake's jaw clenched. The boy, Eli, buried his face in Jake's shoulder, his small body trembling. The chopper's roar filled the air as a rescue team descended. the wind from the blades whipping the water into frenzy. Jake carried Eli toward it, shielding him from the spray. As they lifted into the sky, Eli's fingers curled into Jake's sleeve. His voice was barely audible over the engine's growl. "Do you promise not to leave me too?" Jake looked down at the boy in his arms, the boy who had just lost everything. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. He didn't just see a child who needed saving. He saw his child. And Jake Mercer never broke a promise. "What's your name, soldier?" The helicopter's deafening roar made it impossible to speak, but Eli's grip on Jake's sleeve said everything. The boy's fingers were clenched so tight his knuckles had turned white, as if he feared the wind might rip him away at any second. Jake adjusted the thin emergency blanket around Eli's shoulders and pulled him closer, shielding him from the cold air blasting through the open cabin. Eli's wide, dark eyes never left Jake's face. There was something unsettling in that stare, not just fear, but a kind of hollow resignation, like he had already accepted that the world was a place where people disappeared. Jake leaned down, his lips near the boy's ear, so he could hear him over the rotors. "You doing okay, buddy?" Eli didn't answer at first. Then, in a voice so small it barely existed, "You're a soldier." Jake almost smiled. "Marine. Close enough." Eli studied the patches on Jake's uniform, like they held some kind of secret. His tiny fingers brushed over the embroidered eagle, globe, and anchor. "My uncle was a soldier," he murmured. "He died." Jake's chest tightened. Kids shouldn't know words like that. Shouldn't have to. The helicopter banked sharply, and Eli flinched, his nails digging into Jake's arm. "Easy," Jake said, steadying him. "We're almost there." There was a makeshift relief camp set up on the high school football field, rows of tents, flashing emergency lights, and a sea of exhausted faces. As soon as they touched down, a medic yanked open the side door, her eyes scanning Eli for injuries. "We need to get him checked out," she said, reaching for him. Eli recoiled, pressing himself into Jake's side. "It's all right," Jake said, but the boy shook his head violently, his breath coming too fast. The medic hesitated. "Is he yours?" Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. "No, not mine. Not really." But the way Eli was clinging to him, like Jake was the only solid thing left in the world, made that word no stick in his throat. "I found him," Jake said finally. "His family evacuated without him." The medic's expression darkened. "Jesus." She crouched to Eli's eye level. "Hey, sweetheart, I just want to make sure you're not hurt, okay? Can you let me do that?" Eli looked at Jake, waiting. Jake nodded. "I'll be right here." It took another few seconds, but Eli finally loosened his grip and let the medic guide him to a folding cot. Jake followed, close enough that Eli could still see him. The checkup was quick. Mild hypothermia, no major injuries. The medic wrapped Eli in a dry thermal blanket and handed him a juice box. "You're one tough kid, you know that?" Eli didn't respond. He just stared at the ground, his legs swinging slightly, toes not quite touching the floor. Jake crouched beside him. "You thirsty?" Eli took a tiny sip, then held the box out to Jake. "Nah, that's all yours, champ." A flicker of something crossed Eli's face. Confusion, maybe, like he wasn't used to being allowed to keep things. A voice crackled over the radio nearby. "Sergeant Mercer, report to command." Jake exhaled. "I gotta go talk to my CO for a minute. You gonna be okay here?" Eli's fingers curled around the juice box, crushing it slightly. "You're coming back?" The question hit Jake like a punch. No hesitation. No doubt. Just a simple, quiet fear that Jake might walk away and never return. "Yeah," Jake said, squeezing the boy's shoulder. "I'm coming back." Command was chaos. Officers barked orders. Radios screeched with updates, and maps of the flood zone covered every flat surface. Jake's commanding officer, Captain Ruiz, barely looked up from his clipboard. "Mercer, you're supposed to be on transport duty." "Found a kid, sir," Jake said. 6 years old. Family left him behind. Ruiz's jaw twitched. "Christ." He rubbed his forehead. "Caseworkers are swamped, but we'll get him processed. You're needed on the west side. They're pulling people off roofs near the..." Sir, Jake interrupted, I'd like to stay with him. Ruiz finally looked up. What? The kid scared. He doesn't know these people. I told him I wouldn't leave. For a long moment, Ruiz just stared at him. Then he sighed. You're not a babysitter, Mercer. No, sir, Jake said, but I'm the only thing he's got right now. Ruiz muttered something under his breath, then waved a hand. Fine, but the second they assign him a caseworker, you're back on duty. Understood. Understood. When Jake returned to medical tent, Eli was exactly where he'd left him, perched on the cot, swinging his legs, staring at nothing. But the second he saw Jake, his whole body straightened like a puppet jerked upright by its strings. Jake sat beside him. You holding up? Eli nodded, then, after a pause, Are you in trouble? What? No. You were gone a long time. Jake frowned. He'd been away maybe 10 minutes. To a kid, though, 10 minutes might as well be forever. Sorry, Jake said. Had to check in. But I'm here now. Eli studied him, like he was trying to decide if that was true. Then very quietly, My name's Eli. Jake smiled. I know. What's your name? Jake. Eli turned the name over in his head. Jake. He repeated, testing it. Then, with a seriousness that didn't belong on a 6-year-old, Are you going to leave when the storm's over? The question hung between them, heavy as the rain outside. Jake didn't have an answer. At least, not one he was ready to say out loud. So he just ruffled Eli's hair. Let's get you some real food, huh? Eli let himself be led toward the mess tent, but his hand found Jake's again, holding on tight, like he still didn't quite believe Jake would stay. The promise. The mess tent smelled like canned beans and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow over the rows of folding tables where displaced families huddled together, eating in silence. Jake guided Eli to an empty spot, grabbing 2 trays of whatever the volunteers were serving, some kind of stew that had seen better days. Eli poked at it with a spoon, his nose wrinkling. Not a fan. Jake asked. The boy shook his head but took a small bite anyway, chewing slowly like he was forcing it down. Jake watched him, noting the way Eli's eyes kept darting around the tent, lingering on other kids clinging to their parents. A little girl nearby was crying into her mother's shoulder, and Eli stared at them like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Jake cleared his throat. You got any favorite foods? Eli thought for a moment. Peanut butter, he said finally, and the kind of mac and cheese with the dinosaurs. Jake smirked. The best kind. Eli almost smiled back, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth, before his expression dimmed again. He set his spoon down carefully. Jake! Yeah. Where do I go next? The question was so blunt it caught Jake off guard. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth was, he didn't know. Eli would be handed over to child services, processed into a system already overflowing with kids who'd lost everything. Foster care, group homes, temporary placements. It was a gamble, and from the look in Eli's eyes, he knew it too. Jake chose his words carefully. There are people whose job it is to help kids like you. They'll find you a safe place to stay until... Until what? Until your mom comes back. But Jake couldn't bring himself to say it. What if she didn't? A commotion near the tent entrance cut through the noise. A woman in a rain-spattered blazer was talking to one of the medics, flipping through a clipboard. A caseworker. Jake's stomach sank. Eli followed his gaze. Is she here for me? Before Jake could answer, the woman spotted them and started weaving through the tables. She had the tired but determined look of someone who'd been doing this too long. Eli, she said, crouching beside him. Hi, sweetheart. My name's Ms. Rivera. I'm going to help take care of you, okay? Eli didn't move, didn't blink. His fingers curled into fists on the tabletop. Ms. Rivera glanced at Jake. And you are... Sergeant Jake Mercer. I found him. She nodded. All business. We've got temporary housing set up for displaced children. I'll need to ask you a few questions about where and how you located him for our records, but then we'll get him settled. Settled, like he was a piece of furniture. Jake's jaw tightened. He's scared. Ms. Rivera softened slightly. I know, but we're trained for this. She turned back to Eli. We've got other kids there, too. You can make some friends while we look for your family. Eli's voice was barely a whisper. I want to stay with Jake. Ms. Rivera hesitated. I'm afraid that's not how it works. Honey. Eli's chin trembled, but he didn't cry. Just stared at Jake like he was waiting for him to fix this. And God help him. Jake wanted to. He stood abruptly. Can I talk to you outside? Ms. Rivera looked surprised but followed him to the edge of the tent, where the rain drummed against the canvas. Jake kept his voice low. How long before he's placed somewhere? It depends. A few days, maybe weeks. We'll try to locate relatives first. And if you don't... She sighed. Then foster care. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears. He thought of Eli's hollow stare. The way he clung to him in a helicopter like Jake was the only thing keeping him from drowning all over again. What if I took him? The words were out before he could stop them. Ms. Rivera blinked. You. Temporarily. Emergency placement. I've got an apartment in Baton Rouge. Stable income. Clean record. She studied him. You're active military? I've got 2 months left on my enlistment. After that, I'm out. And you want to take in a child you just met? Jake looked back at Eli, sitting alone at the table, small and stiff and too brave for his own good. Yeah, he said. I would. Ms. Rivera exhaled. It's not that simple. There are home studies, background checks. Then start the paperwork. For a long moment, she just watched him. Then quietly, why? Jake didn't have a polished answer. No noble speech about saving kids or making a difference. Just a memory of Eli's voice in the helicopter. Do you promise not to leave me too? And the realization that he couldn't break that promise because no one else is going to fight for him. Jake said. Ms. Rivera's expression shifted. She pulled a card from her pocket. Call this number tomorrow. Ask for Gloria in emergency placements. But Sergeant Mercer? She met his eyes. Don't make promises you can't keep. When Jake returned to the table, Eli was exactly where he'd left him, but his stew was untouched. Hey, Jake said, sitting across from him. You okay? Eli didn't answer, just stared at his hands. Jake reached over and nudged the juice box toward him. You should drink that before it gets warm. Eli's fingers twitched, but he didn't take it. Are they coming to get me now? Jake took a breath. Listen, I talked to Ms. Rivera. I'm going to try to... It's okay, Eli interrupted. His voice was flat. I know how it works. And that was what broke Jake's heart. Not the fear, not the tears, but the resignation. Like Eli had already accepted that adults left, and rules were rigid, and hope was something that happened to other kids. Jake leaned forward. Eli, look at me. It took a second, but Eli finally did. I don't break promises, Jake said. Ever. Eli searched his face, looking for the lie. When he didn't find it, his shoulders relaxed just a little. Jake slid the juice box closer. Drink, then we'll figure out what's next. Eli took the box, held it, didn't drink. Jake! Yeah. If I have to go away, will you visit me? Jake's throat tightened. He reached across the table and squeezed Eli's hand. You're not going anywhere, he said. And for the first time since the storm, Eli believed him. The judge's doubt. The fluorescent lights of the family court buzzed like angry wasps overhead. Jake sat stiffly on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, his dress blues itching at his neck. Beside him, Eli swung his legs nervously, his 2 big dress shoes, borrowed from a donation bin, scuffing the tile floor. You okay? Jake asked quietly. Eli nodded, but his fingers were knotted together in his lap, his knuckles white. Ms. Rivera emerged from the courtroom, her heels clicking. They're ready for you. Jake stood, but Eli didn't move. His wide eyes locked onto heavy oak doors like they led to firing squad. Kneeling, Jake adjusted Eli's crooked tie, a tiny clip-on they'd found at a thrift store. Remember what we practiced? Eli swallowed hard. Tell the truth. Don't fidget. Say yes, sir, and no, sir. That's my guy. Jake ruffled his hair. And no matter what happens in there, I know. Eli's small hand found Jake's. You don't break promises. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and old books. Judge Wilkins peered over his glasses as Jake and Eli approached the stand, his expression unreadable. Sergeant Mercer, he began, flipping through a file, you're petitioning for emergency custody of a child you've known for... He checked his notes. For days. Jake's palms dampened. Yes, Your Honor. The judge leaned back. You're aware this is highly irregular. With all due respect, sir, so is leaving a 6-year-old in a flood. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's lips thinned. Beside Jake, Eli stood perfectly still, just like they practiced. But Jake could feel the tremble in the small hand clutching his. The judge turned to the social worker. Ms. Rivera, your assessment? She stepped forward. While Sergeant Mercer's intentions appear genuine, we have concerns. He's active military with no parenting experience. His lease prohibits children. And... She hesitated. We've located the maternal grandmother in Texas. Jake's stomach dropped. Eli stiffened beside him. The judge steepled his fingers. Sergeant, why should I place this child with you instead of blood relatives? Jake's mouth went dry. He'd prepared for this, had stayed up all night rehearsing arguments about stability and bonding. But now, staring into the judge's skeptical eyes, every practice word evaporated. Then he felt Eli's fingers tighten around his. Your Honor, Jake said slowly, I can't tell you I'll be the perfect guardian. I don't know the first thing about parent-teacher conferences or packing lunches. He took a breath. But I know what it's like to feel abandoned. And I know that when I promised Eli I wouldn't leave him, I meant it. The room fell silent. The judge studied them. The battle-hardened Marine in dress blues and the little boy who wouldn't let go of his hand. Finally, he removed his glasses. I'll allow temporary placement pending home studies and grandmother's evaluation. His gavel cracked. Next case. Outside, Eli exploded like a shaken soda can. We won. He jumped, his dress shoes slapping the marble. Jake, we won. Ms. Rivera approached, her expression guarded. This isn't over. The grandmother has rights. When? Jake interrupted. She'll be here Thursday. She lowered her voice. And, Sergeant, that lease issue isn't going away. Eli tugged Jake's sleeve. Can we get dinosaur mac and cheese? To celebrate. Jake forced a smile. Yeah, buddy, we can do that. But as they walked to the car, Jake's mind raced. 3 days until the grandmother arrived. Maybe less before the landlord found out. And beneath it all, a quiet terror. What if I'm not enough? Eli skipped ahead, then turned, beaming. Jake, hurry up. And in that moment, Jake realized it didn't matter if he was enough. He'd promised. And Marines don't retreat. The first night, the apartment smelled like pine-scented cleaner and new beginnings. Jake set down the duffel bag of donated clothes, all Eli owned in the world now, and watched as the boy stepped inside, his eyes wide with something between wonder and terror. This is it. Eli whispered, fingertips brushing the peeling wallpaper near the door. Jake rubbed his neck. Yeah, it's not much, but... Eli spun in a slow circle, taking in the second-hand couch, the tiny kitchen, the single bedroom visible through the half-open door. It's huge, he breathed. Jake's chest tightened. The place was a shoebox, a studio with a bonus room, the landlord called a bedroom. But to a kid who'd spent his life in cramped trailers and emergency shelters, it might as well have been a palace. Eli's sneakers squeaked on the linoleum as he darted to the window. You can see everything from here. Jake joined him. 4 floors up, the view was mostly of the parking lot and a slice of the highway beyond. But Eli pressed his palms to the glass like he was memorizing it. Home sweet home, Jake muttered, then immediately wished he hadn't. Home was too big a word for this. Too permanent. Eli didn't seem to notice. He was already exploring, opening cupboards with the reverence of an archaeologist uncovering treasures. You got 2 forks, he announced solemnly. Jake snorted, living large. A beat of silence. Then Eli asked too casually, where do I sleep? Right, that. Jake gestured to the bedroom. You take the bed. I'll crash on the couch. Eli's eyebrows shot up. But that's your room. Not anymore. Eli chewed his lip. What if I get scared? Jake's throat went dry. He hadn't thought about nightmares, about midnight tears, about all the ways a kid could break in the dark when no one was watching. I'll be right out here, he said finally. You shout, I'll hear you. Eli nodded, but his fingers twisted in the hem of his shirt. Dinner was dinosaur mac and cheese, the fancy kind with the powdered cheese that turned the milk orange. Eli ate 3 helpings, his cheeks smeared with sauce, while Jake picked at his own bowl and tried not to think about the eviction notice he'd hidden in his jacket pocket. No children under 12 permitted. Jake! Eli held up a pasta piece shaped like a stegosaurus. This one looks like you. Jake squinted. Do I look grumpy? So grumpy. Eli giggled. The first real, unguarded sound Jake had heard from him. It changed his whole face, made him look his age for once. Jake's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He silenced it. Eli's smile faded. Is that the grandma? Damn, this kid missed nothing. Could be. Eli set down his fork carefully. If she's nice, do I have to go? The question hung between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Jake chose his words like he was crossing a minefield. Family's important, Eli. But you're my family now. Eli said it matter-of-factly, like stating the sky was blue. Jake's breath caught. Before he could respond, a crash came from the apartment above, something heavy hitting the floor. Eli flinched so hard he knocked over his milk. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The white puddle spread across the table, dripping onto the floor. Then Eli was scrambling back, eyes wild. I'm sorry, I'll clean it. Whoa. Jake caught his wrist. It's just milk. Eli trembled under his grip. You gonna get mad? Something cold settled in Jake's gut. Did people get mad when you made messes? Eli wouldn't meet his eyes. Mama threw things sometimes. Jake exhaled slowly. He grabbed a dish towel and pressed it into Eli's hands. Here, team effort. They cleaned in silence, knees bumping under the table. When the last drops were wiped up, Eli whispered, You're different. Jake didn't ask what he meant. Midnight. Jake lay on the couch, staring at the water-stained ceiling, when a small voice cut through the dark. Jake! He was up in an instant. Eli stood silhouetted in the bedroom doorway, clutching the stuffed bear a Red Cross volunteer had given him. Bad dream. Jake asked. Eli shook his head, then nodded, then burst into tears. Jake crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling to meet him. Hey, talk to me. Eli's words came in gasps. I dreamed. I was back in the tree, and you didn't come, and then the grandma took me away. Jake pulled him close. Eli's heartbeat fluttered against his chest like a trapped bird. I'm here, Jake murmured into his hair. I'm right here. Eli clung to him. Don't let her take me. Jake's arms tightened. He wanted to promise, wanted to swear on his life, no one would ever rip this kid away. But the law was the law, and blood trumped everything. So he did the only thing he could. He carried Eli back to bed, sat with him until his breathing evened out, and watched the digital clock tick toward Thursday, toward the grandmother, toward the end. As he turned to leave, half-asleep fingers caught his sleeve. Stay. Eli mumbled. Jake hesitated, then kicked off his boots and stretched out on top of the covers. Eli immediately curled against his side, his small hand fisting in Jake's shirt. Outside, a siren wailed. Somewhere in the distance, the highway hummed. And in that tiny room, with this tiny human trusting him so completely it hurt, Jake made a silent vow. However long he had left with Eli, a day, a week, a lifetime, he'd make it count. The grandmother's visit. The knock came at exactly 10 a.m. Jake had been awake for hours, scrubbing the apartment until his hands were raw, making sure every surface gleamed. He'd even bought a new shower curtain, one with colorful fish that he thought Eli might like. Eli sat frozen at the kitchen table, his hands clamped around a glass of orange juice. She's here, he whispered, as if saying it too loud might make her disappear. Jake forced himself to breathe. You ready? Eli's eyes were huge. What if she doesn't like me? Before Jake could answer, the knock came again, sharper this time. He opened the door to a woman who looked nothing like he'd expected. No soft gray hair or cookie-baking smile. This woman was all edges. Sharp cheekbones, sharper eyes, her silver-streaked black hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a crisp pantsuit and carried a leather purse that probably cost more than Jake's monthly rent. Sergeant Mercer? Her voice was cool, clipped. Yes, ma'am. Jake stepped aside. Mrs. Flores? Dr. Flores. She corrected him without looking at him, her gaze already sweeping the apartment like she was assessing a crime scene. Then her eyes landed on Eli. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Eli shrank back in his chair. Dr. Flores' polished facade cracked. Just for an instant, her breath hitched, and her manicured fingers trembled before she clenched them at her sides. Me, Joe, she whispered. Jake expected Eli to run to her, to embrace the grandmother he'd never met. Instead, the boy looked at Jake, silently pleading. Dr. Flores noticed. Her expression hardened. May I speak with my grandson alone, Sergeant? Jake's stomach twisted, but he nodded. Eli, you okay with that? Eli hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. Jake retreated to the hallway, leaving the door slightly ajar. He paced the length of the corridor, straining to hear through the thin walls. At first, just murmurs. Then Dr. Flores' voice rose. You belong with family. Followed by Eli's small, stubborn reply. Jake is family. Jake's chest ached. The door flew open. Dr. Flores stood framed in the doorway, her composure flawless again. Sergeant, a word. She stepped into the hall, shutting the door firmly behind her. Up close, Jake caught the faint scent of expensive perfume and something else, the sterile tang of a hospital. I'll be blunt, she said. I'm filing for custody immediately. Jake's vision tunneled. Eli just lost everything. Uprooting him again. You uprooted him. Her voice cracked like a whip. You took him from his home state, enrolled him in a new school. To save him. Jake bit back. Where were you when he was clinging to that tree? Dr. Flores flinched. For the first time, she looked her age, weary, human. I didn't know, she admitted. My daughter, we haven't spoken in years. She straightened. But I know now, and I have the means to give him everything. Private schools, stability. What about love? The words tore out of Jake. She studied him for a long moment. Then, quietly, you care for him? It wasn't a question. Jake didn't trust his voice. He nodded. Dr. Flores exhaled. The hearing is in 2 weeks. Until then, she glanced at the closed door. He clearly wants to stay with you. Jake blinked. You're not taking him today? Not against his will. Her lips thinned. But understand this, Sergeant. I don't lose. Not in court. Not in life. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and your landlord? He won't be evicting you. At Jake's stunned look, she almost smiled. I bought the building this morning. Then she was gone, her heels clicking down the stairwell like a retreating judge's gavel. Jake found Eli curled on his bed, face buried in the fish-patterned shower curtain Jake had hung just that morning. She's scary, Eli mumbled. Jake sat beside him. She loves you. Eli peeked out. She said I have to go to Texas. 2 weeks. 14 days. Jake's throat tightened. We'll figure out. Eli suddenly launched himself at Jake, wrapping his small arms around Jake's neck with surprising strength. I won't go, he vowed, his breath hot against Jake's skin. I'll run away. Hey! Jake pulled back, cupping Eli's face. Listen to me. No matter what happens, no one can take away how much He choked on the word love. How much I need you, okay? Eli searched his face. Then, with devastating simplicity, then why are you crying? Jake hadn't even realized. He wiped his cheeks roughly. Allergies. Eli wasn't fooled. He pressed his forehead to Jake's, their noses touching. 2 weeks is forever, he whispered. Jake held him tighter. Outside, a storm gathered, dark clouds swallowing the sun. 2 weeks. 14 days. And then the war for Eli would begin. The first fight. Rain lashed against the apartment windows, turning the glass into a blurry, distorted mirror. Jake sat at the kitchen table, staring at the legal papers Dr. Flores's lawyer had delivered that morning. The words petition for custody glared up at him in bold black ink. Eli was supposed to be doing homework at the coffee table, but Jake could feel the boy's eyes burning into him every few seconds. "You're staring," Jake said without looking up. Eli quickly ducked his head, his pencil scratching furiously against the worksheet. "Am not." Jake rubbed his temples. The legal jargon swam before his eyes. Best interest of the child, stable home environment, familial bonds. Each phrase another nail in the coffin of their fragile little family. A loud snap made him jump. Eli had broken his pencil in half. "Whoops," Eli muttered, but his jaw was set in a way Jake recognized. The same stubborn tilt Jake saw in the mirror every morning. Jake sighed. "You okay?" Eli shrugged. "Do I have to see her again tomorrow?" Dr. Flores had insisted on weekly visits until the hearing, dinners, outings, a slow integration into her world. Last time, she'd taken Eli to a science museum. He'd come home silent and tense, clutching a stuffed astronaut he refused to let go of. Jake chose his words carefully. "She's trying to get to know you." Eli's face darkened. "I don't want her to." He flung the broken pencil pieces onto the table. "She's going to take me away, and you're just letting her." The accusation hit Jake like a punch. "Eli, it's true." Eli jumped to his feet, his small body trembling. "You're not even fighting." Jake stood so fast his chair screeched. "You think I'm not fighting?" He grabbed the legal papers, shaking them in the air. "I've spent every damn night filling out these forms, calling lawyers, trying to figure out how to keep you. But she's got money, Eli. She's got a house. What do I have? A crappy apartment and a landlord who only let me stay because she bought the building." Eli's lower lip quivered, but his eyes blazed. "You have me." Jake's anger evaporated. He sank back into the chair, suddenly exhausted. "Kid, the court doesn't care about that." Eli didn't move. Then, in a voice so quiet Jake barely heard it, "You promise." The words were a knife to the ribs. Before Jake could respond, Eli spun on his heel and stormed to the bedroom, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the dishes in the cupboard. Jake dropped his head into his hands. 2 hours later, the apartment was eerily silent. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the tension hung thick as fog. Jake stood outside Eli's door, a bowl of dinosaur mac and cheese in hand, the ultimate peace offering. He knocked softly. "Eli, you hungry?" No answer. Jake eased the door open. Eli was curled on his bed, facing the wall. The astronaut plushie crushed his chest. Setting the bowl on the nightstand, Jake sat on the edge of the mattress. "I owe you an apology." Eli didn't turn around, but his shoulders tensed. Jake took a deep breath. "You're right. I did promise. And I'm not giving up. But I need you to understand. Sometimes fighting doesn't look like yelling or punching. Sometimes it's just not letting go." Slowly, Eli rolled over. His eyes were red-rimmed, his cheeks streaked with dried tears. "Really?" Jake nodded. "Really?" Eli studied him for a long moment. Then, with the gravity only a 6-year-old could muster, "I'd rather live here with you than in a mansion with her." Jake's throat tightened. He nudged the mac and cheese closer. "Eat up. We've got a war to plan." Eli finally smiled, small but real. He took the bowl, then hesitated. "Jake." "Yeah. If we lose, will you visit me in Texas?" The question was a sucker punch. Jake reached out, ruffling Eli's hair. "Let's not lose." But as Eli ate, Jake stared out the rain-streaked window, his mind racing. They needed a miracle, and Jake knew just where to find one. The letter. The VA office smelled like stale coffee and old paperwork. Jake shifted in the hard plastic chair, his knee bouncing nervously as he waited for the counselor to finish reading. Eli sat beside him, kicking his legs absently, more interested in the broken toy soldier he'd found in the waiting room than the tense silence stretching between the adults. Finally, Mr. Ruiz, a Vietnam vet with kind eyes and a limp, looked up from the yellowed paper Jake had handed him. You're sure about this, son? Jake's throat felt like sandpaper. It's the only way. Eli glanced up at the grave tone, his small forehead wrinkling. Ruiz sighed, adjusting his glasses. You understand what reopening your discharge case means? The medical review alone could take months. And if they rule against you, I'll lose my benefits. I know. Jake's fingers tightened around the armrests. But it's the only shot I've got. The letter in Ruiz's hands was Jake's last resort. A formal request to change his military discharge status from medical to honorable. The difference was more than semantics. An honorable discharge would wipe the red flags from his record, the ones that made judges hesitate when granting custody to a combat vet with PTSD. Ruiz tapped the paper thoughtfully. You never appealed before. Why now? Jake didn't hesitate. He nodded toward Eli. Because now I've got a reason. Eli perked up at his name. Are you in trouble, Jake? Jake forced a smile. Nah, buddy, just grown-up stuff. Ruiz studied them, the hardened Marine, and the boy clinging to his sleeve. Something in his expression softened. I'll file the paperwork today. But Jake, he leaned forward, you'd better win that hearing. Because if this backfires... Jake understood. No benefits. No stability. No chance. That night, Jake lay awake long after Eli had fallen asleep, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. The apartment was quiet except for Eli's steady breathing and the occasional honk of a car horn from the street below. A rustling sound made him turn his head. Eli stood in the doorway, his dinosaur pajamas rumpled, his hair sticking up in every direction. Can't sleep? Jake whispered. Eli shuffled forward, clutching his astronaut plushie. I had a question. Jake scooted over, making room on the couch. Eli climbed up beside him, his small body warm against Jake's side. If you were to get a dog, Eli said solemnly, what kind would you get? Jake blinked. Of all the questions. Maybe a German shepherd? Big enough to protect you, smart enough not to chew my boots. Eli nodded like this was a perfectly reasonable answer. I'd get a golden retriever. They smiled. Jake chuckled. We're not getting a dog, Eli. Not now, Eli agreed, but when we win. The certainty in his voice made Jake's chest ache. He pulled Eli closer. Yeah, when we win. Eli yawned, his head drooping against Jake's shoulder. Jake, yeah. Whatever happens, thanks for fighting for me. Jake pressed his lips to the top of Eli's head, breathing in the scent of kid shampoo and stubborn hope. Always, buddy, always. Outside, the first light of dawn crept across the windowsill. 2 weeks, 14 days, and one last battle to fight. The witness. The courthouse steps were slick with morning dew. Jake adjusted Eli's tie for the 3rd time, his fingers fumbling with the tiny knot. Stop fussing, Eli muttered, but he didn't pull away. His small hand found Jake's, squeezing tight. Ms. Rivera appeared at the top of the stairs, her expression unreadable. They're ready for you. Inside, the courtroom felt suffocating. Dr. Flores sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture perfect, her lawyer murmuring in her ear. She didn't look at Eli, didn't smile. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Wilkins entered, his robes rustling. He surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on Eli. This is an informal hearing to determine temporary custody, pending full evaluation. Sergeant Mercer, you're representing yourself. Jake stood. Yes, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Dr. Flores, you may proceed. Her lawyer stood, crisp and polished. Your Honor, my client is a respected pediatric surgeon with no criminal record, a 4-bedroom home in an excellent school district. Jake tuned out the laundry list of advantages. He focused on breathing, on not breaking Eli's death grip on his hand. And most importantly, the lawyer concluded, she is blood. The child belongs with family. Judge Wilkins turned to Jake. Sergeant. Jake's mouth went dry. He'd practiced this speech 100 times, but now the words abandoned him. Then Eli nudged his arm. Jake took a breath. Your Honor, I may not have much. But Eli and I, his voice cracked. He tried again. We chose each other. Doesn't that count for something? The judge's expression softened. Then Dr. Flores's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, if I may call a witness? A side door opened. A woman walked in. Eli gasped, Mom. Jake's blood turned to ice. She was thinner than her photos, her eyes shadowed, but undeniably Eli's mother. She didn't look at her son, just took the stand and placed her hand on the Bible. The lawyer smiled. Ms. Carter, you're recovering from addiction, correct? She nodded. 90 days sober. And as Eli's legal mother, who do you believe should care for him during your continued treatment? Her gaze flicked to Dr. Flores. My mother. The room erupted. Eli made a sound like a wounded animal. Jake reached for him, but Eli was already running. Out the door, down the hall, his tiny dress shoes slapping against marble. Judge Wilkins banged his gavel. We'll recess for 15 minutes. Jake didn't wait. He ran after Eli. He found him curled behind a vending machine, his face buried in his knees. Jake knelt. Eli. She left me. Eli sobbed. She left me in the water. Jake gathered him close, feeling each shuddering breath. I know, buddy. I know. Eli clutched Jake's shirt. Why doesn't she want me? The question shattered Jake. He cupped Eli's face. Listen to me. This isn't about you. This is about her. Some people... He swallowed hard. Some people don't know how to love right, but that's their fault. Not yours. Eli's lower lip trembled. What happens now? Jake had no good answer. The bailiff appeared. Judge wants you back inside. As they walked back, Eli whispered, Will you still visit me, even if I have to go with her? Jake stopped dead. He crouched to Eli's level. Look at me. I'm not letting you go without a fight. You understand? No matter what. Eli searched his face, then nodded. Hand in hand, they walked back into the courtroom, where Dr. Flores waited with a satisfied smile, and Eli's mother stared blankly ahead. The judge cleared his throat. Before we conclude, there's one more witness. The back door swung open. Mr. Ruiz limped in, carrying a thick folder. Sorry I'm late, Your Honor. Paperwork delay. Jake's breath caught. The discharge papers. Ruiz handed the judge the file. Thought the court should know. Sergeant Mercer's status has been upgraded to honorable. He shot Jake a look. Effective immediately. Judge Wilkins opened the folder. His eyebrows rose. Dr. Flores's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. Actually, the judge interrupted. It's very relevant. He studied Jake. Sergeant, it seems you've been busy. Jake's heart pounded. Your Honor. Wilkins closed the file. I'm adjourning this hearing until full home studies can be completed on both households. He fixed Dr. Flores with a stern look. That includes drug testing for all involved parties. Eli's mother paled. The gavel cracked. Court adjourned. As the room erupted again, Eli tugged Jake's sleeve. His eyes were huge. Does this mean we won? Jake exhaled shakily. No, buddy, but it means we're still in the fight. And as they walked out, past Dr. Flores's icy glare, past the mother who'd abandoned him, Eli held his head high, because Jake had promised. And Marines don't break their word. The truth, the apartment was too quiet. Eli sat at the kitchen table, methodically tearing a paper napkin into tiny pieces. The hearing had ended hours ago, but the tension still clung to the air like smoke. Jake watched him from the doorway, his stomach in knots. He should say something, do something, but what could possibly make this better? Finally, Eli broke the silence. She didn't even look at me. Jake crossed the room and sat beside him. Your mom. Eli nodded, his fingers still shredding the napkin, like I wasn't even there. Jake chose his words carefully. Sometimes people, they get so lost in their own pain, they can't see anyone else's. Eli's lower lip trembled. Do you think she ever loved me? The question was a knife to the heart. Jake pulled Eli into his lap, wrapping his arms around him. I think she loves you as much as she can, buddy. But that's not your fault if it's not enough. Eli buried his face in Jake's shirt. His small body shook with silent sobs. Jake held him tighter. resting his chin on top of Eli's head. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the walls orange and gold. The knock at the door came just past 8. Jake wasn't surprised to see Dr. Flores standing there, her perfect composure cracked at the edges. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled. "I need to speak with my grandson," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Jake hesitated. "He's had a rough day. Please." That single word, so unlike the formidable woman he'd come to know, made Jake step aside. Eli looked up from the couch where he'd been listlessly watching cartoons. His eyes widened when he saw his grandmother. Dr. Flores knelt before him, her expensive slacks be damned. "Eli," she began, then stopped, swallowed, started again. "I owe you the truth." Jake moved to leave, but Eli's panic look stopped him. He stayed, leaning against the wall, giving them space but remaining within sight. Dr. Flores took a deep breath. "Your mother, she's sick, Eli. Not with a cold or flu, but in her mind. She's been sick for a long time." Her voice wavered. "And I didn't help her when I should have." Eli frowned. "Why not?" "Because I was too proud, too angry." She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph, a younger, smiling version of herself holding a baby. "This was your mother at your age, before the drugs, before I failed her." Eli took the photo carefully, studying it. "She looks happy." She was. Dr. Flores's voice broke. "And so were you before all this. That's what I want to give back to you, Eli. Happiness. Safety." She glanced at Jake, then back to Eli. "But maybe that's not with me." Eli's head snapped up. "What?" Dr. Flores reached out, hesitantly brushing his hair back. "You love Jake, don't you?" Eli nodded immediately. "And he loves you." It wasn't a question. Jake's throat tightened. Dr. Flores straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place, but her eyes remained gentle. "Then I'll tell the judge I'm withdrawing my petition." Eli gasped. "Really? On one condition." She looked at Jake. "That I can visit, that I can be part of his life." Jake met her gaze, saw the pain there, the regret, the hope. He nodded. Eli launched himself at his grandmother, wrapping his small arms around her neck. She stiffened at first, then melted into the hug, her eyes squeezing shut. When she pulled back, she cupped Eli's face. "Be good for Jake, and maybe someday you can teach me how to be a better grandmother." Eli smiled, the first real smile Jake had seen all day. "We can practice together." Dr. Flores stood, smoothing her pants. She extended a hand to Jake. "Sergeant." Jake shook it. "Doctor." There was understanding in that handshake. A truce. A beginning. As she turned to leave, Eli called after her, "Grandma?" She paused at the door. "Can we still get that golden retriever?" Dr. Flores laughed. A real surprise sound. She looked at Jake. Jake sighed. "We'll discuss it." But as the door closed behind her, he knew the answer was already yes. That night, as Jake tucked Eli into bed, the boy yawned hugely. "Jake!" "Yeah." "Does this mean we won?" Jake smoothed the blankets. "Yeah, buddy, I think it does." Eli's eyes drifted shut. "Good." Jake watched him sleep for a long moment, then turned off the light. In the darkness, he whispered the words he hadn't been brave enough to say aloud before. "I love you, kid." And from the bed, half asleep, came the softest reply. "I love you too, Dad." The homecoming. The shelter smelled like antiseptic and wet dog. Eli pressed his face against the kennel gate, his breath fogging the metal as a golden retriever puppy tumbled over its own paws to greet him. "Jake, look. He likes me." Jake leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying and failing to hide his smile. The puppy was currently chewing on Eli's shoelaces with reckless enthusiasm. "Yeah, I can see that." The shelter worker, a young woman with a nose ring and tired eyes, chuckled. "He's been waiting for someone special. You two thinking about adopting?" Eli's had whipped around, so fast Jake worried he might get whiplash. His eyes were massive, pleading pools of hope. Jake sighed. We're just looking today. Eli's face fell. The shelter worker nodded knowingly. Well, this little guy's name is Sonny. He's about 12 weeks old. Good with kids, housebroken mostly. She opened the kennel door. Want to hold him? Before Jake could protest, Eli was sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor with a wiggling golden fur ball in his lap. The puppy immediately began licking Eli's face, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook with it. Eli giggled, a sound so pure and happy it made Jake's chest ache. Jake crouched beside them. You know a dog is a big responsibility, right? Feeding, walking, cleaning up accidents. Eli nodded solemnly, scratching behind Sonny's floppy ears. I'll do everything. I promise. The puppy chose that moment to climb onto Eli's shoulder, nearly knocking him over in his excitement. Eli laughed again, wrapping his arms around the squirming bundle of fur. Jake watched them, the boy who'd survived a flood, the puppy who'd survived a shelter, and felt something slide into place inside him. He stood, pulling out his wallet. What paperwork do we need to fill out? Eli gasped. Really? Jake ruffled his hair. Merry early Christmas, kid. Eli launched himself at Jake, puppy and all, nearly toppling them both. Thank you. Sonny, caught in the middle of the hug, gave an enthusiastic yip and licked Jake's chin. Jake grimaced. Yeah, you're welcome. The apartment was chaos. Sonny raced from room to room, sniffing everything, tail knocking over a lamp in the process. Eli chased after him, giggling uncontrollably. Jake watched from the kitchen, stirring a pot of spaghetti, shaking his head. 2 months ago, this place had been quiet, empty. Now it was full of life. Scuffed shoes by the door, crayon drawings on the fridge, the sound of boys' laughter mixing with puppy barks. His phone buzzed. Dr. Flores's name flashed on the screen. Dinner tomorrow still on? Jake typed back. Yeah. Eli wants to show you his new dog. The response was immediate. I'll bring chew toys. A crash came from the living room, followed by Eli's voice. We're okay. Jake sighed. He was pretty sure parenting wasn't supposed to be this messy, or this loud, or this perfect. That night, after Sonny had finally collapsed into exhausted puppy dreams in his new bed, a gift from Dr. Flores, delivered within hours of the adoption, Jake found Eli sitting by the window, staring at the stars. You should be asleep, Jake said softly. Eli didn't turn around. Jake, do you think my mom's looking at the same stars? The question hit Jake like a gut punch. He sat beside Eli, following his gaze to the glittering sky. I don't know, buddy. Maybe. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, I hope she gets better someday. Jake pulled him close. Me too, kid. Me too. They sat like that for a while, watching the stars, listening to Sonny's sleepy whimpers. Finally, Eli yawned. Jake. Yeah. I'm glad you're my dad. The words settled over Jake like a warm blanket. He kissed the top of Eli's head. Me too, buddy. Me too. Sonny, sensing the moment, trotted over and flopped across both their laps with contented sigh. And in that small apartment, under those infinite stars, a family of 3, once broken, now whole, sat together in perfect, messy, beautiful silence. The family photo. The courtroom was nothing like Eli remembered. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, painting warm rectangles on the polished wood floors. There was no tension in the air today, just a quiet hum of the air conditioner and the occasional rustle of paperwork. Eli sat between Jake and Dr. Flores. Grandma, he corrected himself, fidgeting in his new dress shoes. Sonny, their now 6-month-old golden retriever, lay at his feet, wearing a bow tie for the occasion. The judge had made a special exception for him to be there. Judge Wilkins entered, his usual stern expression softened by a small smile. Well, Sergeant Mercer, it seems we've reached the end of our journey. Jake stood, his hand resting on Eli's shoulder. Yes, Your Honor. The judge flipped through the final documents. Home studies approved, background checks cleared, and he peered at Sonny. Even the canine member of the household has good references. A quiet laugh rippled through the courtroom. Judge Wilkins removed his glasses. Eli, would you like to say anything before I make this official? Eli blinked. No one had told him he'd get to speak. He looked up at Jake, who gave an encouraging nod, then at his grandmother, who squeezed his hand. Standing, Eli faced the judge. His voice started small, but grew stronger with each word. I want to stay with Jake. He's my dad now, and Grandma can visit whenever she wants. And Sonny likes our apartment, even though it's small. He took a deep breath. Please don't make me go. Judge Wilkins's eyes glistened. He didn't even glance at the paperwork before reaching for his gavel. Then, by the power vested in me, I hereby grant full and permanent guardianship to Jacob Mercer. The gavel cracked. And just like that, they were family. Outside the courthouse, Dr. Flores produced a camera. For documentation, she said briskly, though her eyes were suspiciously bright. They posed on the steps, Jake in his dress blues, Eli grinning wildly, Sonny trying to lick everyone's face, and Dr. Flores standing just a little too stiffly, like she wasn't quite sure where to put herself. A passerby offered to take the photo, so she could be in it too. After a moment's hesitation, she joined the group, her hand resting lightly on Eli's shoulder. Ready? The stranger asked. Say, family, Eli shouted, and in that moment, captured forever in a single flash of light, they were. This story proves that family isn't defined by blood, but by love. If this journey moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life hero stories. And tell us in the comments, what's your definition of family? See you in the next story.